everyone. I'm Maritza Barone and welcome to my podcast, Things You Can't Unhear. As a presenter with a focus on wellness, I have interviewed very many health professionals in my time and heard stories that have opened my eyes about the world we live in today. But I found the best bits that I take home with me and the things I heard that have changed my life are usually when the recording shuts off and we can talk in length behind the scenes. And that's the information that I want to share with you on this podcast. On International Women's Day earlier this year, I posted a collage of images on Instagram of 6 incredible women that had inspired and educated me in my life. And I declared that I hope to sit in discussion with each of them one day. Well, be careful what you wish for, because today I get to chat to one of them and I'm thrilled to welcome Lisa Messenger to today's episode. Lisa Messenger is the founder and CEO of the collective hub that has inspired the entrepreneur in so many of us over the years. She's a best-selling author, international speaker, and complete trailblazer. And she's been titled as an authority on disruption in both the corporate sector and the startup scene. Lisa, what a bio!
Well, thank you. And what a beautiful introduction. It's really nice to be here with you.
Oh, well, I'm blessed to have you with me, and thank you for being on the show. Now, soon we're going to talk about your new and exciting book release that's coming up called Work From Wherever. But I do have to ask you, where are you working from today?
I just said to you, before we jumped online, I got my timing slightly wrong. So I'm actually working from the car right now as we speak.
I love it. And in what particular country?
I'm actually in Australia at the moment, and I have my dog Benny beside me. So, yeah.
Good on you.
Just get me in a very relaxed state right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again for being part of it. Before we get into the book, I do want to ask you about your morning routine, because I'm very big on learning, especially about successful and balanced people, how they start their day and set themselves up. Tell me how your morning routine rolls out.
Well, and I'm not going to feel so bad about this now, because I was just listening to Malcolm Gladwell this morning, and I've read most of his books, and he said he doesn't get up till 8 o'clock, and he's a very good sleeper, and I'm also very well known for that.
And that's a relief, actually.
It's nice because it's counterintuitive to what a lot of people say. It's kind of like the expectation of the societal norm is that once you become a high-functioning entrepreneur, that you get up at, 4 a.m. Actually, my partner gets up at 3:59 a.m. every morning, but I do not. I generally get up, it depends, sometimes between 6:30 and 8 a.m., depending on what I've got going on. I generally sleep 8 to 10 hours every night, but I don't actually start work, and I'm doing that in inverted commas, until 10. So my morning routine is very much around rituals and routines, and that is having a green smoothie, meditating, doing yoga, or going for a walk. This morning I took my dog Benny for a big walk around Sydney Harbour, which was beautiful. And I generally listen to a podcast. So this morning I listened to Tim Ferriss with Malcolm Gladwell. So, that's kind of me. And I try not to look at my emails and check social media too much until I've kind of done all of my own routines, and that way I feel like I set myself up for a highly productive, highly functioning day.
I actually feel great now because I have a very similar routine to you, and my partner also gets up at 4 a.m. every morning, and I roll over and spread across the whole bed, and I think it's fantastic.
I know, except my partner every morning, we wake up to, I don't know why he has got Adele, hello. So every morning I have this like deep, sultry voice at 3:59 a.m. and then I'm like, get out of bed, leave me alone.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, that's a very refreshing morning routine. And you've gone from working countless hours each day in an office to a life more relaxed and working remotely around the world, which is what most of us dream of, really. And the best part is that you're giving people the tools to go out and do this themselves with your new book, Work From Wherever. So tell us, what inspired you with this latest book?
Oh, so many things. I mean, I started my first business in October 2001, and it's interesting because when I started it, I started it so many of us do, largely with the notion of, freedom and choice and doing what I wanted, when I wanted, with whom I wanted. And then as I grew into quite a large global business, it almost became anything but. And for 17 and a half years, I had a physical office and, for the most part, a lot of staff. And it was interesting because I don't know what the listeners identify as, but for me, I'm definitely a creative and a free spirit and a visionary, and I always love moving forward and creating new businesses, and I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. But I just started to feel more and more trapped being in a physical location. And as a business, Collective Hub, the print magazine was in 37 countries within the first 18 months, and it was this huge business. And I just started kind of hemorrhaging cash and drowning and feeling like I was in survival mode. And my role changed very much from being a creative into operations. And that is not where I sit in my genius zone. And I just started feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And I just thought, why am I doing this? Like, the majority of my team have always been decentralized and not worked in the physical office, yet I had 32 full-time staff, over $3 million in fixed salaries. But on top of that, I had probably another 80 or so freelancers who worked all over the world. And so I kind of thought, why are we sitting in this physical office when so much of Collective Hub and the stories which we told were about being a digital nomad or having a side hustle or, putting health as your number one not negotiable priority and all of this stuff. And I was like, well, why am I confining my core team to a physical office? And why am I also doing that? Because I'm very well known for saying, when I was in the office, I was busy, but when I was on the road and traveling for work, I was productive. And so I just thought, I'm going to break it all. And so I did.
Good on you. And you started walking your talk.
Yeah. I mean, I've always walked my talk, but the thing about it is you don't know what you don't know until you're there. And, prior to starting Collective Hub in 2013, I'd had businesses for 11 years and a much smaller team. But when I really stepped into my purpose in 2013, the business got so big and so global, very, very rapidly. And what I realized was I don't want to be a CEO in a physical locality. It's confining, and it really, if you look at it like that, it's a workplace with borders. And actually, the best staff and the best talent on the planet were never necessarily going to be within a 10K radius of my Surrey Hills office. And in fact, my editor, Amy, had worked from Kiama, 2.5 hours south of Sydney, for almost 3 years, running the entire magazine. She wasn't even one of my full-time 32 staff. So I was like, there's so many people like Amy who I rely on a daily basis, yet we're not in the same physical location, and it runs perfectly, it ran perfectly. So I thought, well, why can't I do this for everyone?
It would have taken a lot of bravery and courage to make that change and try this system out. And it seems to have been so successful for you. What was the journey of writing the book, and wherever in the world was it written?
And thank you, because you're right. I think one of the traits entrepreneurs have is that I haven't had a child yet, but it might be a little bit the same as going through childbirth. I think people sometimes say, at the time it's excruciatingly painful, and then you're kind of like, oh, I'm ready for the next one. And so, yeah, I shouldn't diminish the courage it took and kind of the pain that I went through to make this decision, because, there was a lot of very big changes that had to be made to kind of wind out of a big office environment, notwithstanding a 5-year lease that was nearly $300,000 a year that I had to try and exit out of, and, changing my entire full-time staff and, getting them comfortable on varying levels about going freelance or, all sorts of other things. So it was difficult to do, but I bounced forward extraordinarily quickly, and I'm very proud of the resilience or the resilient muscle, I guess, that I've honed over the years. So work from wherever. Like all my books that I've written, 7 in the last 5.5 years, I always come up with the title first, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to step into this and live my life out loud and show that this is possible. And so I did that last April, so April 2018, I decided I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be called Work From Wherever, and therefore I am going to purposefully travel the world and prove that I can continue to run a pretty big global business, actually a couple of, I've got a couple of startups now as well, and decentralize the whole team. So I purposefully, I went to Bali for almost a month last April. I did 2 big tours around Australia, which were 10 towns in 10 days in New South Wales, 10 towns in 10 days in Queensland.
Wow.
I actually did 63, I think, speaking gigs last year all over Australia and through Asia. I spent all of December in Europe between the UK, France, and Denmark. I spent all of January in Byron Bay. So I was really not in Sydney much at all. So the fact that I'm sitting in Sydney in my car at the moment, just doing normal everyday things, is quite good.
You're lapping it up and you're loving it. Oh, it sounds like a dream, though, and something that a lot of people would relate to, and feeling confined in an office environment. I'm definitely one of them and have chosen, and it's taken me a long time to realize it, but now I've realized that that's not what my heart desires, and it's not how I work best. And other people out there are, I'm sure, feeling exactly the same way, just judging by the response you're getting from this book already before it's even come out.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's the thing, and maybe we can dig more into that, though, because it's great to have this dream. And, very much I've written the book for, digital nomads or solopreneurs, for people just working, on their own, and they've got a lot more freedom. But I've also written it for, quite serious entrepreneurs, and how do you still run a pretty big global team. And it's also written for entrepreneurs, so people working within a big corporation, and how can they actually have conversations with their bosses so that they can enable themselves this freedom as well. But the biggest thing around it is, it doesn't suit everyone, because whilst it sounds, and you will have experienced this perhaps as well, it sounds wonderful and amazing, but you've got to have absolutely rigorous discipline, more so than when you're in an office. Because it's sort of funny, when you're working in an office, you kind of have this automatic sense of purpose. I mean, you need to get to an office by 8 or 8:30 or 9 or whatever your start time is. So every day, very purposefully, this is where I need to go. Whereas when you're working in a decentralized sense, you've got to have that form of, discipline and rituals and routines to actually continue to give you that sense of purpose and, guide you through your day. There are people it doesn't suit at all, and they're like, what? But how do you know what to do? Who tells you what to do? So, it's like anything. I think it's a learned thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it might not be for everyone all the time, but it might suit someone over a short period of time. And then they may feel like going back to an office after they've, feel like they've released those boundaries for a while and lived flexibly. So
100%. And also through different times of our lives, whether we're having children or we have an ailing parent, or, our health routine changes, or a myriad of other things, or, some of us work really well. Like my boyfriend loves working at 3:59 a.m. Like he does his best work between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. when I'm sleeping.
Why 3:59? I must ask.
I don't know. I've asked him that. I think it's like, there's so many little tricks we do for ourselves, but maybe it's like because it's got a 3 in it.
Yeah,
sounds better than
he's
a 4.
waking up in the hour of 3.
Yeah, but for me, that kind of working, I couldn't think of anything worse. Like, I'm not a morning person. So I operate really, really well at different times of the day. So I think that flexibility and working within, people's own parameters and boundaries of what works for them, I love that. And I just think we should embrace it much more. Even if you're working in an office, let people come in at 7 and leave at 2 or 3, or let them come in at 10 and leave at 8 at night. Like, I just think flexibility is the key to the workforce moving forward.
Definitely agree with you. Now, at the start of the book, is something that I absolutely love, and it's you being completely authentic and open to everyone again. And you've listed your Nomad Manifesto.
Oh, yeah.
There's 2 points that you made that really excite me. And one of them is you've said to spontaneously help people out in all sorts of situations through random interactions and conversations. Can you tell me about that one and what that means to you?
I think, when I was running a big global business in an office, it was almost like, and people listening may have experienced this at, different stages and to different degrees, but I got so focused on running the business and also so embroiled in kind of the operational day to day that it was almost like if I just didn't have time to be present to necessarily individuals that needed my assistance, or I could be of service in a spontaneous moment. And, arguably my whole life I have tried to make it my mission to be in service, but on a, broader scale, which doesn't necessarily always mean, individual interactions. And so I just was like, I just wanted to ground myself and land back in, if I meet someone, just to actually stop and be present and see how in that moment I can help them out. And, just have much more of that real, one-to-one human connection. And so that's been something that's become increasingly important to me, to just take the time. And, throughout so much of the high growth period of Collective Hub for at least 6 years, I guess, sometimes it was even friends or family members would be like, hey, can you help me with this? Or, hey, are you free for dinner? And it almost like when I slam the phone down and think, how do I have time for that? So my thing now, 2 words for the last year have really been around time and space, and also reprioritizing, which is why my personal manifesto was so important to kind of go, I think it's really good to recalibrate and go, what are our priorities? What does our perfect day look like? How can we best be of service? Otherwise, so many of us just glorify being busy, and we just wrap ourselves in that whole, just being busy. And I just didn't want to continue like that.
And you can make some such incredible connections through random meetings of people, and they can lead you in such incredible ways through your life that you had not anticipated. So that's why I really loved that one so much.
Thank you.
The second one that I really liked was, as soon as it's not fun, I have to be brave enough to pivot.
Yeah.
And there's that bravery again.
Yeah. Look, I think I have never been one to take business or life too seriously. I mean, I'm pretty much laugh my way through the day, and often catch myself thinking, really, is that important or that serious? And I think, as soon as something, whatever it is in life, isn't fun anymore, and that's something so brave. So many people go along leading life according to other people's expectations. And that could be all sorts of things where you find yourself just, on this treadmill of life. It could be any kind of routine or any kind of entrapment that you've, found yourself in. And it happens to all of us, however conscious we are about how we want our days to look, or however present we are, or however focused on our particular individual purpose or why. It's still, I find myself all the time thinking, what is that the best use of my time? Is this actually what I set myself up to do? And so it's really important to be able to keep reevaluating that, if not daily, weekly, and kind of go, is this the best use of me? Is this the best way I can live my purpose? And if not, we'll be unafraid to break it and pivot. And, I've made some massive pivots, like when I decided to, break the entire office and cut the guts out of my entire cost system and really break down Collective Hub in its current iteration in April 2018 in order to essentially break the brand to remake it. But it can also be in much smaller, smaller ways, just all the time thinking, is this what I want to do? Is this how I catch myself? I think it's important.
I think so too. What I've read about you and what I've heard you speak about many times is that you've almost feel like you've been led on a pathway that was meant for you in your career, obviously with a ton of hard work and dedication. But I've heard you mention over various times in your books and interviews that you you just fell into things, or you moved into them accidentally, or you were bumbling along and then you came across something that really worked for you? Do you feel like your soul's purpose has been guided to this spot at this exact time to share what you know?
Yes, I do. But having said that, and it's interesting, I was talking to my boyfriend about it last night because I've been over the last year sort of, my real passion and my real purpose is to find the next iteration of Collective Hub, and that is not really a print magazine, and I don't think it's a digital format. So I've been kind of really looking at what is that? Is it a tech play? Like, how does that manifest? But in the interim, and we were discussing this in detail last night, I've decided to do something which would, to the outside world, potentially sound completely incongruous with my purpose, and that is to start a fashion brand. And we were talking about it last night because it started off as this like silly little idea of kind of a ridiculous product, and then I was like, well, actually, it is completely on purpose, because what I want to do is just start it and purposely choose something ridiculous so that I can document the journey and again prove to other entrepreneurs and startups and anyone with a dream and a vision that anything is possible by doing something again in an industry that I know nothing about. But he and I last night were like, this started as a small idea and it's kind of turned into something quite big. And this kind of actually is poignant to a lot that we've already discussed in this interview. I really looked last night at, is this getting too big now in terms of, because he said to me, is this something you're prepared to do for the next 3 to 8 years of your life? And I said, absolutely not. Like, this is meant to be a fun little sideline fashion brand, purely really to prove that I can, diversify across different industries and verticals and prove that truly I am an entrepreneur. So again, I had to really question last night, do I stop this? Is this getting too off purpose? Is it getting too big that it actually is going to start to take up, a lot of my time? And then I said to him, but I haven't really worked out what the next iteration of Collective Hub is, to be honest. So sometimes you just have to start something. And by the very nature and virtue of that, you actually start to meet all sorts of different people and start having different conversations. And in my experience, it just starts things. And as long as you're open and you're detached from a specific outcome, but you stay true to your purpose, then just by the nature of having those conversations, things start to unfold that you may never have otherwise imagined. So I kind of said to Stephen last night, I think I just need to keep going with this, but with awareness that, the fashion brand isn't the be-all and end-all, but it is at the moment opening me up to other conversations. And as long as I keep on purpose around being an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs, living my life out loud, showing that anything's possible, then let's see where it goes. So that kind of discusses a lot of different points, but I think action over inaction anytime is going to, open you up to different opportunities.
Well, a collective fashion label sounds very exciting to me, and potentially something that you could build up and sell after a couple of years. You never know. Here I am giving you advice now.
But that is a really, really, really good point, because with this one, it's like, I can't see myself doing it for any more than 3 years. Like, it's not my thing, right? Collective Hub and what that stands for, about giving voice to and inspiring on the other side so many entrepreneurs and startups, is like my absolute passion until the day I die. A fashion brand, yeah, but I'm happy to flip that in 3 years and kind of go through that process and learn, because I've never sold a business to date. But collective really is my passion for ever, in some iteration.
Well, it's good. You've got an itch and you're scratching it. So I think that's great. What advice do you give to people who are struggling to find their purpose or their passion? I know it's hard for people who feel a little bit lost, or they know their passion, but they're stuck in a job or a career that makes them miserable, but they can't see a way out because of financial pressures. How do they start on their journey?
Well, so in 2017, I wrote a book called Purpose, which you may or may not have seen.
Yes, I'm sure I have.
You're gorgeous. And at the time, I was like, oh, that sounds like such a big, arrogant topic. But then, like I explained before, I came up with the topic and then decided to, reverse engineer how I had come across my purpose, because so many people had said to me, oh, but how did you do it? And I've got great editors who push me hard, and they say it's all very well once I land there, but I almost need to go back and really look at what were my learnings? How did I get there? And so that entire book really talks about a lot of tips and tricks that I've come across. But just quickly, there's a few things. I think if you listen to, it's kind of like that external validation piece. If you listen to kind of what people are saying around you in terms of, it might be little things like, oh my gosh, you're great at cooking, or oh wow, you're a really big idea person, or you'll start to hear some repeat things, and you might be like, okay, I'll take notice of that. Like, the world sees me for being really good at this. And then the second part is, what do you feel great doing? Like, what makes you want to jump out of bed every morning? When do you feel most alive? So that's the other piece. And then the third piece is really, the commercial aspect. Is there a market, and is that potentially a way to make money? And money in and of itself doesn't really mean much. I don't think I know a lot of people with a lot of money who are extraordinarily unhappy, but it's but we do need it to survive. But I think if you look at those three things, like what's that repeat kind of thing? What are people saying? Oh, you're good at that. What makes you really, really super excited and, feel alive? And is there some kind of commercial viability in that? So they're kind of three good things to look at. But what I would also say is just keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, just to slightly explore, because you won't know. I mean, I started doing singing lessons recently because I am a horrible singer. I am so off tune. And I was like, I just want to push myself a little bit. And I kind of surprised myself, and I was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. So I purposely put myself in slightly uncomfortable situations, be they personal or business, all the time, and just to test, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's like you're never too old, you're never too young, whatever, to start something.
I can't wait for your number one hit single.
Do you know, I have this thing, like, I don't know if anyone's ever seen me speak, but I'm like, I always have like a handheld mic. I never have like a Madonna mic. I have this kind of bit of latent rock star in me, and I just cannot sing.
Now, I want to shift this a minute, because I want to talk about the hustle. So once you've decided to pursue your passion, then it's the hustle that you've got to get that project out there and the name out there. Now, recently I read a post on a media professionals Facebook group that I'm part of, where a TV executive producer was having a bit of a rant, and she said, if one more person emails me saying, I'd just like to reach out, or I'm just hoping to connect with you about something, she's like, I'm just going to go mad. And she was furious that people were using connect and reach out every single time that they contacted her. And I'm like, oh my God, I've done that to so many people so many times. I wonder if they eye roll when my email lands in their inbox. But then I heard you say once in an interview that if you're going to contact someone in your industry or in your network, simply make it easy for them to say yes. And that was such powerful advice for me.
Yeah, thank you. So I can dig into that whichever way you want. My other least favorite, very well documented, I can't stand it. If anyone ever does this to me, I'm never going to say yes, is, hey, I hear you're the guru of blah, 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 insert whatever.
Oh, right.
Can I pick your brains over a coffee? Pick your brains. No, you cannot.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
Don't do it. I actually, I heard someone the other night, and I am so sorry, I cannot remember who, so I can't attribute it at the moment, but she reframed it again, and I thought this was brilliant. She said, and we'll come back to my make it easy to say yes, but she said, say yes to everything, which is quite different. Normally you're like, a lot of people are like, learn to say no more, because then you leave room and space for the things that actually matter. But she said this, say yes to everything. But the thing is, yes if. I think that's what she said. So I thought that was great, because it's always like, yes, I'll do it if you do this for me. So it's always contingent on something, and it's very much that notion is comes back to what I often say, which is about value exchange. I believe there always should be some kind of value exchange, whether that's a monetary value exchange. So, hey, I'd love your help with this, and I will pay you market rate to, advise me or do the job for me or whatever it is. Or, I'd love your help with this, but also, hey, I can do this for you. And to break that down, I always kind of go, if you have a similar values and belief system as someone else, be it in life or in business, that's the best place to start. You just go, do we, share similar values and beliefs, have a similar audience or whatever. So rather than starting with the monetary exchange or whatever the exchange is, just agree, we share similar values and beliefs. Okay, great. From there, what can we possibly do together, and what is that exchange, And also, I mean, gosh, so many things. I've asked things of people, and as in my role of editor, been continuously on the asking end of people, where literally, we would get at the height of Collective Hub, I don't know, over 100 emails a day asking for us to showcase people in the magazine. And most of it is just 99% is trash. It's people just saying, this is my product, put me in the magazine. And it's like, well, where's the value for our readers and our community? Do you even know about the publication? Because you've just done this smatagun thing about something that's actually completely irrelevant. Whereas if someone came to me and said, hey, I'd love to, tell this story because I think it'll be really useful to your readers because of X, Y, and Z, and I think it will fit really well in this section, and then, identify a specific section of the magazine, then I'm like, oh, absolutely. I mean, editors and media, people are dying for great content, so make it easy for them to say yes. But if it's a scattergun approach about, the latest lip gloss or something that's, I don't care. I can't care less about it. Exactly. If it's like, who made the lip gloss? How did they make it? How did they fund it? How's it going to save the planet? I don't know. Like, sure, let's go for it. But so it's the way you package the conversation, I think,
I think that's really great advice. Adding value to them rather than just asking, help me, help me, help me, is giving something back. And that's when they're going to perk their ears up and say, oh, I'm going to get something out of this as well. And I'll also get to help you. And it's a two-way give and take. I think that's brilliant advice.
Thank you. And also it's, don't underestimate the power of relationships, and also the power of, handwritten cards and, acknowledging people. So often if there's someone that, I'm wanting to have a meeting with or, start a conversation with, then, I'll do my research about, what do they love in life? What are they excited about? And I may, before you start, cold calling or whatever, I may send a handwritten card saying, hey, well done on your latest award or your, position change, or I might send them, I'm lucky because I'm an author, I might send them a copy of my book and say, hey, I noticed that, you're trying to change the way you work, you might enjoy this book. Like, I'll start by giving something to them and starting the relationship rather than a cold call and, hey, I want to pick your brains, or hey, I want. It's always like, what can I do for you first, and how can I start to build that relationship? And then let's have a conversation about how we can help each other, or,
I love that. I think, that's such great and simple advice, and sort of going back to just simpler times when people weren't bombarded with emails. Now it's something different. It's receiving something in the mail and going, oh, I might just put that on my desk and then I'll think about you 15 times a day as I look at it. It's the only handwritten card I've received in the last 7 years.
Be counterintuitive and do your research. I think that's the thing. And you're so right. It's like when I brought out a print magazine when people said print was dead or dying and it was all about digital. If I had have launched Collective as a digital play, it would have just gone under the radar and no one would have noticed. But because I came out with something, physical and tangible, I think that's, largely why it created such a splash. And in the same, with the same notion, it's like, well, be unafraid to send someone a handwritten card, or, just discover what they love and do something thoughtful, So,
agree. I think that's great. Now I'm going to change the direction of this again, because this is something that's come up a lot with people that I've interviewed and some of my friends lately is sobriety. And
Yes.
I know you haven't drank alcohol for many years. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 14 and a half years. It will be 15 years on the 8th of November this year, 2019. So, yeah.
What was the tipping point to start the journey of sobriety?
Well, so there's many things I can say about this. I mean, my journey is my journey, and there will be certainly other people who relate to sobriety or alcohol, and they would identify that as something that is inhibiting them in their lives. Mm-hmm. So I guess listen for the similarities, not the differences. But for me, I was using alcohol as a crutch. So I was kind of lacking in, like, I think I always, inside me, I always had this, great vision about doing something amazing in the world, but I was keeping myself small, and I hadn't yet really learned how to step into that. And so as a result, I was kind of numbing myself and using alcohol to kind of squash everything down and using it as escapism and all that kind of thing. And I hadn't dealt with a lot of my demons in my life at the time, and I'd alienated my parents, and I was in a really unhappy place. I didn't have a sense of who I was or what I wanted out of life or what my purpose was, and so I just used it to numb myself essentially, and it just became unpredictable and an extraordinarily lonely place to be, and I was just growing more and more unhappy, and in fact I spent much of my 20s suicidal, and it was pretty horrible. So I got to a really dark place. I guess rock bottom is a great place to be if you don't keep going. Yeah. And it was kind of a life and death situation for me, I guess. So I was fortunate that I got myself through a friend to an AA meeting at the time, and that was one of the most extraordinary things I have ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. Most humbling, grounding, extraordinary group of people, and and I was extraordinarily lucky that I continued on that path. So
thank you for sharing that, Lisa. That's a personal story, and I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners.
That is absolutely fine. I mean, it's such a we're not defined by our stories, and so I've made it my mission to share mine out loud, because I think it's only by us being vulnerable and authentic and actually sharing, and because that's such a long time ago for me. I'm well and truly at peace with it, but be unafraid, because I remember at the time just being so ashamed and living with this self-loathing and fear and guilt and all sorts of other things, and actually making the decision to get myself to a meeting was so scary, but it was the bravest, most courageous thing. And really from that moment on, I remember I was like, I just feel like, I found a tribe. I can actually start to live and heal. And I did. And from that moment on, I chose to live in joy and with happiness. And, that's when the work really started, I guess. But it's extraordinary. Like, giving up drinking is probably the single most important thing I ever did in my life. And for people listening, you might be saying that I don't have a problem with alcohol, so don't give up drinking, but do be courageous enough to find out how you're self-sabotaging or how you're keeping yourself small or what you're using as a crutch. Even with, coffee or exercise or anything, I'll watch myself around, am I like needing to get up and have a coffee? So I really now quite purposely try and break any little unhealthy habits that I see creeping in, because they do for all of us all the time. We're not perfect, and I'll be like, it's not really about the particular substance or whatever. It's about, is that actually starting to control my mindset more than me, being in control of it or whatever.
That's a really good point. I didn't consider that it doesn't have to be alcohol that you have an addiction to. It could be anything. So that's a fabulous point. Now, you're my 14th interview for my podcast, and I wish I had thought about this earlier, but I didn't until now. So I want to ask you, maybe to pay it forward. So ask you, who inspires you in daily life that you think has something powerful to share that would be good on this podcast that we should listen to next? Who is an inspiration to you?
Oh my God. You know, I have so many amazing people. Some of my dearest friends, I mentioned Nat Bassingthwaighte before. I mean, she's like one of the most extraordinary, beautiful humans that I've met. And we met about 5 years ago, and it was like an instant love fest. But she's someone who, traverses so many different industries. She's a mummy. She has a brand, Cheeky, which is her beautiful kids clothing brand. She's like a freaking rock star, awesome, singer. She's on TV. Like she's just done so many things, and she's
kicking goals.
She's one of the most beautiful, down-to-earth, gorgeous, loving humans, and I just love her to bits. So, and she has just so many lessons and so much wisdom, and we share so much together, and I love her. My boyfriend, who I never talk about, but I will give you his name off air, and you can interview him. I never talk about him publicly, but because of my previous relationship, which was quite public, but we've been together 3 years, and he is probably the most humble and extraordinary entrepreneur I have ever met, and he is so much smarter than me. And I'll tell you later off air who he is, and you can interview him and not connect the dots, but he is just such a guiding light and guiding force for me, and I just love him to bits. And he's so grounded, and he's had a massive exit in business, and he's now doing another massive startup, and he's much smarter than me because he gets lots of investors. To date, in 18 years of business, I've never had an investor.
So you're a powerful duo then together.
Yeah, he's beautiful. But I don't know, so many.
I would love to interview him, Lisa. Thank you. That would be great. Are you reading any particular books at the moment that have lit you up? We were saying the other day, our house is like a library. We laugh at each other because we probably have, I don't know, I would say well over 500 books. We keep building shelves and putting more and more and more books in, but so many of them we skim and we don't read cover to cover. I'm one of those people who has so many different books open at once. It's actually crazy. I know, I do that too, and I don't know if that is a bad thing or a good thing, but if you're not enjoying it or you're not feeling it at that particular time, should I waste 2 more weeks of my life and finish reading it, or do I come back to it later? So I never really know whether to finish or start something new that feels right for me at that time.
I know. And then my boyfriend, when we were going through them all the other day, because we do it every now and again, we kind of like do a stock take on what haven't we read lately? And he's like, this one I want to read every year. And I was like, we're having trouble getting through one book a year, let alone reading one on repeat every year. It's sort of crazy because I'm an author and an avid reader, but I seldom read a book cover to cover. Like I skim so many, I probably on a daily basis skim about 10 books, but I rarely read one cover to cover. So
actually, that's what I love about your books is that they're very easy to read, and you can turn 3 or 4 pages in a couple of minutes, and you feel like you're really getting through it because of the beautiful imagery. And I think that's really refreshing because you get through it quite quickly, but
and that's why, thank you for saying that. That's why I've written them like that, because they're about end to end a 3-hour read. And I've done 7 in the last 5.5 years now, but I've broken them up specifically with big pull-out quotes or, pictures, work from wherever. My latest one has more pictures and visuals than any of them, because I think that's a bit what we're like these days. Unfortunately, our attention spans are a bit short and we love kind of snackable content. So because I read that way, I think I've written how I like to read.
Yeah.
So,
and it's tend to, have you considered audio books, recording on audio?
I have. So I've done my first in the series, Daring and Disruptive, and also Money and Mindfulness, the second in the series on Audible. And that's, I've got to get around to doing the other ones. It's so funny. When they said, would you like to do it? I was like, yes. And they said, well, would you like to have a professional voiceover artist? And I was like, no, don't be ridiculous. Like, they're my books. I need to read them in my voice. I'm the one who's lived through them. I know the tone. But it's really funny because I'm a bit of an ad-libber. I'd kind of be like, I'd add a few words in, or I'd be like, I should have changed that.
Go off topic.
But then they keep saying, you have got to read it absolutely word for word verbatim. And so there's a guy in the studio next to me who's like, no, go back. And even if you put like an A in or an S on the end of a word or change anything that isn't in the physical book, you have to go back. So it's actually quite an arduous task, especially for someone like me who's a little bit naughty and tends to go off piste.
Like breaking the rules, Lisa.
Yes. I love breaking the rules.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I've absolutely loved every minute of speaking to you. And if you're enjoying the show out there, make sure you subscribe to Things You Can't Unhear, as there's a lot more to come, and that includes Lisa's boyfriend on the show.
Who no one will know who that is because you won't tell anyone.
I won't tell anyone. Thank you, Lisa. Everyone, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.